Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Well, let's make him sing happy birthday.
You want me to clear the room? I'll sing happy birthday.
How about now, Connor? They say no.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that everybody can pick up all your words, all your pearls of wisdom.
Okay, we'll start.
Okay. Can you adjust? Dawn, if it's not good, can you say it's not good? Okay. Alrighty. Very good. Sorry about the delay, folks. We had meetings prior to this. So just as a brief housekeeping, I need to read the Open Public Meeting Act, which I think Peter should be doing, but hey, I won't be bitter about it. The New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the school districts of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough, the Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the TAP, which is an online newspaper. Mr. DeQuille, would you mind taking attendance?
Sure. Mr. Gilfillan. Here. Mr. Arnold. Here. Ms. Ciccarelli. Ms. Clark. Ms. Kenny.
Here.
Mr. Ryan. Here. Mr. Valenti. Here. And Ms. Weber.
Here.
6 present and accounted for.
Excellent, thank you. If you're able, could you please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? The flag is by the door. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Perfect. Thank you very much. We originally had part of the president's comments. We were going to have a student come in and speak. She's going to move that to the end. Basically, we've been asked to create a position, a student representative for the Board of Education. The student will sit in the audience, represent the board. Emily Lamb is the student that's put this proposal forward, and she's a senior, so this is not to benefit her. She's putting this position in place going forward so that the students' voices can be represented at the board meeting and they can take information back. Dr. LaSousa is doing slides tonight on later start times. That would be something that the student rep could take back and get feedback from the students and maybe even some staff, depending on, chatter that they have with their own teacher. So Emily Lamb's going to come probably toward the end and present her proposal to the board. Many other districts have this position. And when I first started on the board, too many years ago, there was a young man who took this upon himself in an informal manner, and it was really invaluable. Sometimes we would just say, hey, what do you think about this? Or can you take this back and come back? And it was informal, but Emily Lamb would like to make this a little bit more formal, a little more structured. She's also putting it together as part of her Gold Award, which is fantastic. But again, she's not really benefiting from this initiative, but I believe students and even the board and the administration might benefit going forward. So we'll hear from Emily a little bit later. I do not have any of my own initial comments other than putting Emily on hold. And then we're going to pass it over to the superintendent for his report. Dr. LaSousa, happy birthday, and off you go.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. I have a few items underneath my section of the agenda. 2 of them will wait for a little bit, but the first one is to recognize some of our staff. I was a little confused when I walked into the room because I thought all of Milton Avenue School was here, and I didn't anticipate that. But every year, of course, there are certain days and certain events that are kind of the highlights or get us excited. One of them, of course, is the first day of school. Another one is high school graduation. And another one for some of us in this room is the new teacher orientation in August, because it's the first event that marks the beginning of the year, and it's one that is filled with optimism and enthusiasm and hope. And we enjoy welcoming our teachers in, and tonight is somewhat of the product of that initiation and the hard work that some of our staff members have put forward over the last 4 years. So we have a slew of folks who have achieved tenure as of this school year. We've invited all of them to either this board meeting or the one right before Thanksgiving on November 18th. So we have a list of folks who were able to join us tonight. We have a few others that will come in later on in the month, and then there will be some that just can't make it because of other commitments that they have. So I'd like to acknowledge each person, and when I call your name, I'll ask you if you could just stand up and smile and wave, and maybe Ed will take your photograph. But we're going kind of by school, except for an administrator who Phyllis has put on the top of the list. So one of our principals has been with us for 4 years now and is tenured, and his name is Nick Andrieza. He's over there. Milton Avenue School. And following along with Milton Avenue, we've got Renee Calavita, who is not here, but is on the list. Kudos to Renee. Also have Amanda Turton, and I know I saw her. And Amanda was one of the hosts for the delegate of the 20 Chinese principals who came and visited us last week. And she was putting on a show in her classroom, as I told Nick afterward. I'll recognize Gail Hatch along with the Milton Avenue crew. And now I've gone completely out of order, so now I'm going to get lost. But next up, I'll welcome Anne-Marie Steigerwald, who also is a teacher. And she's been with us at both Milton and Washington Avenue schools. Following along with Washington Avenue, we've got our nurse, Christina Sachs. Moving over to Lafayette, Jen Fernandez. Let's see if she's here. Liz Lafferty. There's Liz. Dina Mazzacano. And Jess Taylor. Saved our middle school for last. We've got Catherine Bruner. And Maureen or Missy Dangler. And if I've forgotten anyone, could you please stand up and say your name and yell at me? All right, we've got everyone. Thank you all for coming. You are more than welcome to stay for the full meeting, but of course you can leave now if you'd like. And on behalf of the school district, I just want to thank you for all that you're doing for the students in this district and for the children in this community. And I've been in many of your classrooms or interacted with you directly over the past several years, and you really do a great job, and I just want to thank you on behalf of everyone.
Thank you so much for all you do. If you made it this far, it's a rigorous process, so you must be the best of the best. So thank you. We appreciate it. You do help our kids, our collective and our personal kids, so thank you. I don't know if Ed wants a group picture. You guys want to? Certainly don't have to, but if you want to. Who doesn't like a picture of the paper? I think that's a great idea.
Me.
I know, right? Why don't we do that?
Okay. Connor, does that sound good? Okay. Every year, I give this presentation on how the district performed on state assessments. This year, I'll be sharing results on how Chatham performed on the most recent administration, which was called the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment, which was the first time we administered this assessment because in years prior we had been administering the PARC. So it's not of a sound comparative measure to compare these results against the previous year because they were two different assessments. So the point of comparison for this presentation will be how the state compares with how the district compares to the state. But before I get into the details, I want to bring up a few highlights. So as a district, Chatham outperforms the state, and you'll see in some of these slides, we do so in a great percentage. All of our subgroups, and we're reporting out on more than we have in the past, do outperform the state as well. Especially, you'll see significant increases with regard to the Hispanic and Latino or the special ed and the special education population. We also have more students in grade 8 taking Algebra 1 as opposed to the grade 8 mathematics assessment when we are compared to similar districts and definitely across the state. And you'll see from the valid score slides that I present that very few grade 11 students participated in the assessments. And that's a direct result of them not having to pass them because they've completed the substitute competency tests that demonstrated proficiency as needed for the graduation requirements. So the next few slides are going to show you information about how the district performed in these assessments in both English language arts and mathematics. You'll see to the left that I will share the number of valid scores that we have for the district according to each grade level and or assessment, and the proficiency levels, which range from level 1 to level 5. The last two columns on the right will show the passing proficiency rates for students in Chatham. So it would be any student who scored a level 4 or above. And then to the right of that, you'll see the state's passing rates, and those will be highlighted in red, bold, and then identified by a box. So this is the data from the assessments that were administered in the elementary schools. Students begin taking the assessments in grades 3, and they take them again in grades 4 and 5 in both ELA and mathematics. I'm not reporting out on any science data because we do not have those results yet. So this is strictly English language arts and mathematics. And you could see very quickly by looking at the last two columns that our elementary students outperform the state with the percentage of passing. Again, this information will be posted on the website, so if anybody wants to look at these numbers in more detail, you can absolutely do so. The next slide shows the grade level outcomes for students at our middle school, and you can also see from the numbers in the red box that our students are outperforming the state passing rates. And notice that in grade 8, we have students who have taken 3 different assessments based on the courses that they've been in. So these are the passing percentage rates for students who have either taken the grade 8 mathematics, the Algebra 1, or the geometry. And as I said before, we have more students taking algebra in grade 8, more so than other districts of a similar demographic and socioeconomic status. So the majority of our students in grade 8 took the Algebra 1 assessment. When we get to the high school, we had students who took the assessments in grades 9 through 11. I have fewer than 10 students who participated in the grade 11 ELA, so I won't be reporting out on the passing rates there. But in mathematics, we had students take Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. And you can see from the boxes on the right that Chatham students outperformed the state passing rates with regard to these assessments. This year, as I mentioned, we're reporting out on subgroup data, and these are the 4 subgroups that we're going to be taking a look at. So the next 2 slides will show data related to students who have identified as Asian and fall into that subgroup. So when I compare this subgroup of Chatham against the state subgroup Asian, we see the percentage rates in the box to the right, and again, we outperform the state in ELA, and similarly in mathematics. We had fewer than 10 students take the assessment in grade 8 math, so I won't be reporting out on that data. The next slides show the data available for the students who are in the white subgroup, and we do very well there as well. So there should be a trend emerging right now, you should start to see. And similarly in mathematics. And as I mentioned, the subgroups for students who fall in the Hispanic or Latino, we do very, very well here. And you can see that as it unfolds in the last two columns when you compare our passing percentage rates to those of the state. In many cases, we've doubled in English language arts, and here's mathematics. And then finally, our subgroup for special ed. You could see that our passing rates for Chatham way outperform the state's passing rates in English language arts, and then in mathematics as well. And you could see that we have the number of students who we have scores for in each of those assessment grades. So as I said, we have a lot of positives in this. When you look at Chatham and compare to the state, we're crushing it compared to the state. Our subgroups are doing very well. In some cases, in other districts, you may see that there's a huge discrepancy and or achievement gap between the subgroups and how the general population is. We're not seeing that here. We're seeing equal performance and solid performance in both ELA and mathematics across the board. So we are proud of this. When you look at this one measure of student performance, which is one moment in time, we also have rich assessments within the district that we use to measure student progress, but this is the requirement to report out on this data now. The next thing I want to bring to everyone's attention is what are the new information that's out about the graduation requirements, because this has been something we've talked about publicly and that there's been a lot of press on. So as it stands right now, the students who are in the classes of 2019 through 2022, so we're talking about last year's seniors who already graduated, the graduation requirements for these students is that they demonstrate proficiency in either ELA 10, or if they're unable to do that, by meeting a proficiency cut score on an alternative assessment, such as the SATs, the ACTs, the Accuplacer, or anything else that the State Department of Education has identified as an alternative assessment. And in mathematics, it would be passing Algebra 1 or any of the alternative assessments and meeting those cut scores. If students are unable to meet either of these requirements, they can, through the district, submit a portfolio appeals process throughout to the New Jersey Department of Education. We usually have very few students who need to access that route. And most of our students are able to, through the first two pathways, meet the graduation requirement. Now, our freshmen right now are in a situation where it hasn't clearly been defined for them what the graduation requirements are. There were a proposal and we're in the public comment stage right now. So as of right now, it has been proposed that grade 9 students take an 11th grade assessment that would consist of the content in ELA 10 and ELA 9. And then for math, it would consist of the content in Algebra 1 and geometry. However, this has not been decided, so it is best and the safest way for our 9th grade students to participate in the assessments that they will be taking in the spring. We've had some situations where some students have chosen not to, and then they found themselves in a situation that possibly could have been avoided. When the information is not clear from the DOE, it's better to err on the side of caution. That is the presentation. As I mentioned, if anybody wants to look at these slides in more detail, they will be posted on the website under the curriculum instruction section. And also, if there are any questions, feel free to call me or I will address them now. We have historically we have reported out on a larger number of students, in some cases 30 or 20 students, but the directive from the county office and the Department of Education has been that we are now required to report out on subgroups that have 10 or more students in them. So as a result, you're seeing that we're reporting out on Hispanic or Latino, which historically we haven't had enough of students in that group to report out. So we've traditionally reported out on our white special ed and in some case grade levels Asian students, but that's primarily, they changed the N.
Yeah, so a few students, you can almost identify in some cases who those students are.
Yes, and we did have concern about that, but it was a directive of the county office that we have to report out on 10 or more.
And on the PARC testing, I'm sorry, the testing for the current freshmen.
Yes.
I'm not as concerned about the others because they can take the standardized test, SATs, ACTs.
Yes.
Do any of the students have to sit for the park test or the new park before they can be eligible for the ACT, the SATs, or those other standardized tests?
So the way the language shows on, you're talking about our current sophomores, juniors, and seniors? For freshmen?
Our freshmen. There was confusion last time on these materials are not available, and they sat for all of the tests that were offered to them throughout the years. Is that still the case?
No.
That is one of the items that needs clarification. So what caused all the hubbub a year and a half ago was that after the DOE had posted guidance saying that students could take any one of those measures, the DOE replaced that guidance with new guidance that you could only pursue the alternative assessment if you sat for park and didn't pass park.
All the parks, so not just one of them, correct? Or is that still I don't want one of our students to get to senior year and we say, you know what, you got into Princeton, but we can't hand you a diploma.
Yes, so that's what we're waiting for right now. There have been negotiations between the state board and some members of the legislature. There's a proposal that is supposed to take effect in 60 days for the current freshmen. And one of the open questions is whether or not the current freshmen will be able to graduate using one of those other measures without ever sitting for a New Jersey student learning assessment. We are getting the sense that they will not be able to do that they're going to have to take the NJSLA in 11th grade, and that if they don't pass that, then they can get to alternative measures.
Then that has to be clearly articulated to our parent community.
It will be as soon as the DOE clearly articulates it to us.
I just want our parents to understand that, they'll just take the SAT. That doesn't count if they didn't sit for it. Because a lot of parents are like, I'm going to opt out. You know, most of our juniors opt out.
Yep.
Because they're just over-tested. But I understand, I know you know it, I just want to say it out loud, that our parent community needs to understand that whatever the DOE decides, we need to make sure that the kids have to sit there and somehow we have to explain to them, you have to sign in, you have to, somehow attempt the test, but you have to sit in the room and sign on to the test.
Yes. We will communicate that in crystal clear language once it's communicated to us.
Understood, I get you. And we're not we're not alone on this island. This is the entire state.
Yes.
Does any other board member have any questions?
Can you go back to the special education slide? Just want to say something. I saw something that. One more slide. Keep going. Go backwards. I saw something about algebra in 8th grade. Yeah. So 8th grade, level 4, 13.5%, and the state's at 10. That's kind of close. But then it jumps dramatically to 39.6 for algebra. Do we know why that is?
So the students who are in grade 8, and I struggle. The students who are in grade 8 are taking the grade 8 assessment. So we are removing the number of students who have possibly the ability to go above and do some higher level math because they're factored into the Algebra 1 scores.
So basically, Mike, that's the case for all. I believe it's the case for all groups and subgroups. In 8th grade, our very strongest students in math are taking geometry. Our stronger students are taking algebra, and then our students who are less strong are taking grade 8. Do you hear what I'm saying? You know what I mean? So what happens in grade 8, and this happens in any district where this begins. In some districts it happens a little bit earlier, and in some districts it happens when you get to high school. But when students start peeling off into different levels of math, the stronger kids are placed in an upper level. In this case, what we're talking about would be algebra, and then the students who are not as strong are staying at the grade level for the assessment that's administered in that grade. So all schools are basically filtering the students into and that you must give the assessment in which the student at the grade in which the student is enrolled. So that kind of becomes the default, except when the student has advanced to a higher level of math.
So you have, in this example, you have general mathematics, 8th grade, and then there's an algebra class and a geometry class?
Yes.
But this is middle school and high school mixed together. So those algebra scores are inclusive of students who have taken algebra and who are in special education in both the middle school and the high school, and the same thing for geometry. But the grade 8 scores just represent those students who are actually at the middle school taking in grade 8 taking that assessment. So those algebra scores and geometry include 2 schools worth of scores.
And there's, I can't do the quick math there, so let's say 500 kids here taking this exam,
Taking
taking NJSLA?
in which one? Across, you mean 3 through algebra 2?
Yeah.
Straight down?
About 500.
Yeah.
And the rest take a different exam?
It's not 500. Then something's off if it's 500. Should be around 360. Should be 360.
About, I can't.
We should not have five. We should have in the neighborhood of 350 valid scores.
This is only the special ed population that we're looking at. There's about 350 kids between grade 3 and algebra 2. It's about 350.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, in grade 8, there are 37 children that took this test. 13.5% of those scored at or above level 4.
Okay.
So the second to right column is the total percentages of level 4 and level 5. So anything with a level 4 or above is a passing. So those last 2 columns are just showing the passing rates. So 43.5% of the students in algebra 2 are at the passing level in this subgroup.
Karen, do me a favor. Just go up to the white subgroup for math. I just want to show Mike what I mean. If you look at grade 8 and algebra the same, you can see the grade 8 students, the algebra students are stronger, even though they're in 8th grade. You see how it jumps, the proficiency level jumps, because the strongest students essentially are taking algebra, and the less strong students are taking the grade 8. So what's interesting is when we look at like districts who don't have very many middle school students taking algebra, who not hold kids back, but wait to introduce algebra until 9th grade, they have more strong students in grade 8. So basically what happens in those districts is if you look at their students who are actually in the grade 8 exam cohort, their scores are always higher because they have very few students taking algebra. And this has been one of the byproducts of the introduction of PARC, because it used to be with NJ Ask, every kid took NJ Ask. It didn't matter if they were in geometry, algebra, whatever they were doing, they got grade 8 math. So it's much more difficult now to kind of figure out, at least when you look from like district to like district, because the data is not readily available, to see which courses kids are taking in which grade and how then the whole aggregate is performing.
As Mike said, when we had the New Jersey Ask, we had every student in grade 8 took the grade 8 assessment, whereas now we're dealing with end of course assessments. So the assessment that the students take at the end of their 8th grade is tied directly to the course in which they're enrolled. So we're not seeing the same type of percentages that we used to see on a totally different assessment. But again, this is one. I want to let people, this is one moment in time. This is one assessment that's standardized.
Salud.
First year, New Jersey Student Learning Assessment. I don't get any item analysis back from this test. We get evidence statements, but it's not directly tied to an individual student's performance. So it's one moment in time. We have a lot of other assessments that we do in-house that have been teacher created and actually program made that could paint a more comprehensive picture of the child's performance over time. But this is something that the state administers and that we're required to report out on with regard to percentages in passing. Okay. Thank you. I think we have to wait for open.
Mike, are you doing your presentation now?
Yes,
It's very difficult to hear back there.
Is it really?
I'll go to the back and be loud.
Okay, that works.
Everyone can hear me better. I wanted to follow up on the presentation that we had at the last board meeting, which had to do with student health and well-being. Lisa Lattarulo and Alex Emmer and Christine Mahoney came, and they kind of gave us a rundown of a survey that we administered to students last year, and then talked about some of the pressing issues with respect to student health and well-being. So this takes off from that place and really tries to zero in on the issue of sleep that we talked about a little bit, and then transitions into a discussion, or at least the opening of a conversation about the time that we start our school day, specifically at the high school. And hopefully this was just working. So one of the things that we saw was that students aren't getting enough sleep. Students in our high school in particular are not getting enough sleep. And this is one of those issues that a lot of people have opinions about, but the evidence is really clear about students and adolescents, how much they should be sleeping, and when schools should be beginning their day. So this presentation will be available online. Those are all hyperlinks, all of those organizations, all of those professional medical associations. Every single one of them recommends that the high school day begin no earlier than 8:30 a.m. And the reason for that, to just paraphrase it as an ignoramus, is that the circadian rhythms and other physiological processes in adolescents are different than the physiological processes and circadian rhythms of adults or young children. And adolescents essentially are programmed to go to sleep later in the day, and they are programmed to sleep later in the morning. And if you start their day at 6 a.m., they will sleep less than if you start their day at 9 a.m. And that has nothing to do with when they intend to go to sleep. It has nothing to do with when you turn the lights off. It has nothing to do with when you take their cell phone away. They're biologically programmed to go to sleep later in the day, and they're biologically programmed to get up later. So when schools, and there are many examples of this across the United States, change their start times and push them back, what happens is that students sleep more. That's just what the outcome is. And when that happens, some of the negative behaviors and negative side effects of not sleeping enough tend to dissipate, and some of the more positive behaviors and more positive outcomes increase. So that's why all of these organizations recommend that. And it's important also to note that the recommendation is that they get that much sleep on a regular basis every day. In other words, getting 8 hours of sleep 7 days a week is different than getting 6 hours 5 days a week and then 12 hours on Saturday and Sunday. It's not quite the same. So the American Academy of Pediatrics just puts it as students should get, or adolescents should receive, 8 to 10 hours of sleep within each 24-hour period of time. So going back to the survey that Lisa and Alex spoke about, We surveyed all of our students, or at least gave all of our students in grades 6 through 12 the opportunity to participate in the survey, but we only surveyed those who had permission from their parents and then went ahead and answered the questions on the survey. This was back in February of last year. And this was a kind of generic graph that shows the distribution of sleep among our students over that grade span, grades 6 through 12, with 4 hours being the blue bar furthest to the left and 9 or more hours being the furthest to the right. And what is interesting about this to me is that this kind of looks like a bell-shaped curve. It doesn't jump out at you as maybe there being a real significant issue or problem here. So what I want to do is kind of pull apart this chart a tiny bit, and I know this is hard to see, but if you look at the results by grade, what you begin to see is that students sleep less and less as they approach 12th grade. So the orange bar is 8 hours of sleep. Our kids who are in 6th and 7th grade, and even 8th grade to a certain degree, they get 8 hours of sleep. At least a good number of them do. But that number starts to drop as the kids advance and get into the high school. To kind of pull it out a little bit differently, the orange is 8 hours and the red is 9 or more. And you can see that things really start to fall off the table in that 8th to 9th grade transition. And when you get all the way down to 12th grade, students are really, they're not getting the amount of sleep that the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends. So one takeaway from this, at least for me, is that the real ground zero of sleep deprivation in the district is the high school. It's not the middle school. Our middle schoolers, many of them anyway, are sleeping enough, but our high schoolers largely are not sleeping enough. And to kind of just reverse the graph a little bit, the black are kids who are reporting 6 hours of sleep, red is 5 and blue is 4. So you can see, tipping it the other way, that again, the high school is when things really jump and kids start cheating themselves out of sleep. Another way to look at the cumulative effect. So what you see here is that by 11th and 12th grade, the majority of students are getting 6 hours or less of sleep. Whereas going down to 8th and 7th grade, fewer than 20% of students are sleeping that little. 11th and 12th grade, we've got the majority of students, and the particular numbers are listed here. All right, going back to this main graph. So that was by grade, and something that we touched on in the last meeting had to do with stress levels, amount of homework being done, pressure on oneself, and what we were talking about with all of that was that our female students were, tended to report doing more homework, feeling more stressed than our male students. Not surprisingly then, our female students also are sleeping less than our male students. So again, just kind of pulling out the numbers. Blue is 7 hours, red is 8, and yellow or orange is 9 or more. And you can see that our male students in all three of those categories are sleeping more than our female students. Putting it in the opposite direction, males versus females, 6 is represented by the orange bar, red, 5 hours is the red, and 4 hours or less is the female. And you can see our females basically are reporting twice as many of our females are reporting 5 or fewer hours than our males. That's, if you group them all together, close to 40%. And Alex shared this at the last meeting, which was just the correlation. This doesn't mean one causes the other, but the correlation as we track amount of sleep students are getting, and then the consideration of suicide and the making a plan to commit suicide by the gray and orange bars. So we should try to get our students more sleep at the high school level. That's the takeaway, one of the takeaways here. And we've been talking about this for many years, and many years we kind of hit a roadblock or a dead end because we have challenges in trying to get students to sleep more. And the challenges are, first, just schedules in general. We have 6 school buildings. They all have a slightly different schedule, or at least the upper elementary, middle school, and high school have different schedules than the 3 pre-K through 3 buildings. We have big problems with transportation. We've spoken about this at times at the board level, but right now there's a statewide and nationwide, from my understanding, shortage of bus drivers. This has put a lot of stress on school districts in New Jersey. There are some school districts that are struggling even to run athletic events because they can't find buses and drivers for the buses to transport students. That's probably our single biggest obstacle on this list. Third bullet is traffic. So even if we magically had all of the buses and bus drivers that we needed in Chatham, if we started school in a more compressed time period, meaning let's just say theoretically the high school were to begin at the same time as the middle school, or both the middle school and the high school were to push back to 8:30, we'd have a lot of traffic on the road at the same time, and that traffic would be funneling into a pretty small geographic area. And then we have other competing issues. So for example, at the current time, high schoolers can make it home and they can receive their younger siblings. If you start the high school day later than the elementary school day, that may be difficult or impossible in some cases. There's darkness and there's light, as we know from falling back. I read an article this weekend on the internet that had to do with the movement all across the country, actually, to make daylight savings time permanent and not change time, because it actually has a negative impact on people. The fallback time has a negative impact on people. And in this article, they cited that the biggest obstacle to doing that is very young children waiting for the bus stop in the dark in the middle of the winter on rural roads. And then finally, we have athletics. Of course, there's only so much light in the day. That means that the time of athletic contests like soccer games, as an example, can't simply be pushed till 7 o'clock at night on fields without lights. So I'd like to start talking about some potential options moving forward. Some of these will be dead on arrival for sure. Maybe one or two others has something of substance that we could seize upon. I've just sort of nicknamed them 6 different options here, and I'll say right off the bat that none of these might work, or maybe components of a couple of them might work and they need to be blended or massaged in some way. But I'll just touch on all 6 of them really quickly so the conversation can begin. So option number 1 would be to go real late, which simply would be to push the high school start time to later than all of our other schools, at 9:15 as an example. On the plus side, if we did that, we really wouldn't be interrupting the bus routes, and therefore we wouldn't have to interrupt the start times of the other schools. There would probably be no cost to that, because instead of running the high school bus first thing in the morning, we'd run the high school buses toward the end of the morning. The problem with doing that is that if we keep the length of the school day the same, high schoolers are not going to get out until close to 4 o'clock. That's going to have a dramatic impact on student athletes who might have contests in other towns and therefore have to be released from school a couple of hours early. And it would require that high school students get home after their younger siblings on most days. So pluses and minuses there. Second option, which is one that other school districts in the United States have done, is to flip the high school time with some segment of the elementary school aged schools in the district. And the benefit here, again, is that you can keep bus routes tiered. You don't have to do much else to the school day. You simply just change the times. And so, for example, here we are at the same campus as Lafayette. If the high school in Lafayette Avenue School could just flop when they start the day. It would probably be good for the high school students to sleep some more, but it would have some of those same negatives in that the elementary students would be impacted. Some of them would get home after their high school siblings, and it would also require that the younger students are the ones waiting for the bus earlier in the morning than the older students. Number 3 would be to try to combine or compress our start times. Princeton did something like this a couple of years ago. They've moved their high school start time back, and they start, I believe, their high school and middle school at the same time. They have different factors and considerations than we do. It's nice to have a consistent start time, but that means that there's more traffic on the roads all at the same time. It also breaks the tiering of the buses, and this is back of the envelope type of estimate for a bus route that costs approximately $60,000 a year. If you broke the tiers, you'd probably have at least 5 bus routes that would require then a single run. So at $60,000 a year for a bus route times 5, you're looking at about $300,000. Again, that's a rough estimate. We'd have to go out to bid, and we'd have to, make that number more precise, but I put that on here for the purpose of just discussing it. Even if you had the money to do that, you might not be able to staff the actual buses because of the driver problems that we're all experiencing. And then we do have the student athlete issue, though it wouldn't be quite as bad. If you started the day at around 8:30, student athletes would probably only have to miss 1 class at the end of the day when they had a contest, and we do that now actually pretty regularly with student athletes. Option number 4 is probably the least disruptive in a lot of ways. And it would basically be to do what we do now when we administer PARC, which we just talked about, or NJSLA. When we do that here at the high school, we call it delayed opening. And we have to do that for infrastructure purposes because the tests are given online and we can't test all the students in a gym. So one thought that I have toyed around with is, what if we selected a day of the week, and it doesn't have to be Wednesday. I kind of like Wednesday. Wednesday's hump day, all of that. But you just started the high school day 2 hours later each Wednesday. And then at least students would know that they've got 2 days to get through, then they get some respite in the middle of the week. It really wouldn't be too impactful. Our staff members largely are dealing with this now when we have a special event day like PARC testing. The downside is that it's not every day and doesn't create a consistent pattern of sleep every day of the week for students. But it probably wouldn't cost anything, and it wouldn't disrupt other schools. So students therefore would still be able to get home before their younger siblings and still make it to athletic contests. We could shorten the length of the high school day, and then we could push the start time back. The problem is that doesn't solve the busing and transportation and traffic issues. So I think the high school could think creatively about shaving off a few minutes from each period of the day, but it doesn't get us over the hurdle of some of those other issues that we have. And then maybe the most, radical idea would be to adopt a more virtual model of schooling, or a hybrid model, where as right now we have 4 periods in the high school day in the morning that rotate through 3 slots. We have 4 periods in the afternoon that rotate through 3 slots. If we did that throughout the day, so classes still rotated through various periods, but when they got to the beginning of the day, the students weren't showing up to school, but instead were expected to do the work electronically or digitally or virtually in an asynchronous way, meaning they didn't have to log on to the computer at 7:30 in the morning to keep up, but rather the teacher posts some of the classwork online or in digital format, and the students can work on that on their own. It would result in more flexibility to the high school day. Still, though, we'd have to work out issues with respect to when students are arriving here and whether or not that's generating more traffic than we can handle on this campus. And naturally, there could be, like I said, combinations to the above. So, moving forward, some of us administratively and at the high school level, the principal and some of his team have discussed these kinds of issues and these types of options that we might have. We need to continue and deepen the discussion, I think. I think we need to get serious about maybe getting feedback from certain groups that would be affected if we were going to try to pilot or seriously consider adopting one of these types of options. We would need to establish a timeline, and in my opinion, the implementation should be either this coming September or the September that follows. And then we should develop the concrete plans to implement if we decide that that makes sense. And that's it from me. Happy to take questions.
Can you put slide 14 back up, Mike, please?
No, they were numbered.
I numbered them.
Can you tell me which one 14 is?
Yeah, it's the graph that shows the suicide. Sorry, it's a slightly different presentation than you sent. So I don't think we can gloss over this enough. These are not percentages out there. These are students in our school that have thought seriously enough about suicide that they made a plan in which to end their life. I don't know how to say that any clearer. And if getting them more sleep gets these numbers moving in the right direction, we need to do it. If you say that the risky behavior is directly impacted by the amount of sleep that our middle schoolers and high schoolers are getting, and these numbers I believe are from our survey from the middle school and high schoolers. But I mean, these are actual kids in our school that have decided that if they're going to kill themselves, they have a way to do it. I almost want this slide up every meeting. This is critical. This is what the administration and the student assistance counselors are dealing with on a day-to-day business. Students are actually thinking of a way to end their lives. Students that are walking our halls in this library. So you said 20, September 20 or 21. Maybe it's a hybrid. I mean, you can do seize the day fairly quickly, correct? Like you can, if you don't
Yes,
have the
most
whole
likely,
thing
yep.
baked, maybe you can do part of it. But somehow we need to get, I don't know if the student assistance counselors can weigh in on would a seize the day approach have an impact on that numbers? We can't do nothing, given this slide. We can't do nothing. That's a given. And then, go ahead.
It almost seems to me at that point you have to have, almost everybody has to be in sync with this. Every town has to be in sync with it in order to deal with scheduling, because I think it's more important for kids to not miss school than it is for them to make an athletic event on time. That's just going to be very difficult to overcome unless everybody's on the same page. But my question and my viewpoint of this, not viewpoint, but what kind of takes me back is though it seems as though it's almost this whole, everything is being blamed on school. That the impact of why they're staying up late is because of school issues, whether or not it be too much homework. But I believe we have guidelines or something that says, I remember seeing things that saying if you're doing more than 4 hours of homework a night, you're probably not either managing your time correctly, or you're just basically maybe need other issues to bring that number inside. So how much of this is, in all honesty, is educating our kids to manage their time and the requirements and the benefits of 8 hours of sleep versus just simply moving the school day and changing, which has been something that, as you can see up there, there's a lot of cons, there's a lot of issues that it would need changing for. If you are doing more than 4 hours of homework, if you are doing, stressing out over tests, you're overstudying, but how much of this, honestly, should be about educating, talking to parents about establishing bedtimes, which I do, which is basically saying if you're a 6:30 wake up, you should be in bed by 10:30 to get those 8 hours of sleep. But it appears as though we're blaming this on school versus is that the wrong approach? And what we should do is be educating the kids and the parents more aggressively in terms of the benefits of 8 hours of sleep, watching over your kids, making sure they're managing their time appropriately, get their hour of downtime, and then in bed at 10:30. We can't enforce a system-wide, bedtime. But me, being if I'm given the opportunity where I can go to school later, I'm staying up later against that, right? So I'll sit up and I'll watch TV or read something till 2 o'clock instead of 12 o'clock because I just want to make sure I get that time frame of sleep. So in all honesty, is it better for us, cheaper, more manageable to deal with this from the education side the benefits of the 8 hours of sleep and talk to the kids, talk to the parents about managing time frames and putting in place the home policies to try to not force, but recommend these kids get these 8-hour times of sleep.
I think that is certainly part of the conversation, and we do need to continue to try to educate students themselves and parents about what's an appropriate amount of workload and how to set, good habits and routines in the home. But I will return to that slide behind you, because when you really get into this and you read the case studies and you look at the National Sleep Foundation resources, they remind you that simply putting the kids to bed earlier or even establishing a 10:30, that's it, doesn't always result in more sleep because of the physiological nature of adolescence. So I think while that's part of the problem or part of the solution for sure, I think the other part is that high schools should begin their day later. But to your point, I was some of us were down at school boards at a presentation, and another superintendent mentioned it would be much better if New Jersey did what California did. He joked that he was saying that, but California, they just put this into law, and it's happening in 3 years, I think. If every school was on the same schedule, it would resolve some of the issues, or at least the concerns that might arise about scheduling athletic contests, or even other, everything from tutoring to who knows what that usually takes place after school. Dance, athletics, would be better if we were all in the same ballpark.
Mike, are there any school districts right now that we could speak to in New Jersey or nearby, Connecticut, New York, who have implemented these later times and might be collecting data that we could look at?
I know of a couple in Connecticut. Princeton did this a year or two ago, I think, in terms of the time frame. They did it. I don't know if it was 1, 2, 3 years ago. There are other school districts around that we could visit, that we can speak to. Ridgefield in Connecticut is a district that I think we may have played actually in football this season. They're similar to us demographically, and they were doing this, I think, 10 years ago they started with a later high school day, is my recollection. I have to get back into the weeds, but there are school districts around.
And those that do it, they collect data?
I believe so.
Okay.
Mike, I know I was late, but I previewed these slides before coming to the meeting. One thing that I would think as part of the conversation, I think it's really important to include our staff into their thinking and what the impacts would be on childcare and different logistics in terms of the staff and teachers and what this impact. Granted, we need to kind of look at and balance all the stakeholders. We know what the best practice is, but we need to make sure that it's practical and that we can maintain the level that we have. I do think to dovetail on what Matt said, I think the education piece is so important because I don't think people realize that you can tell my 16-year-old to go to bed. I can't force my child to go to sleep. They're two different things. And I think we're talking about sleep and active sleeping time, and that has to do with so many different components that are physiological I have looked at all these studies, and I think there's nothing that says that we shouldn't do this. And so now I think we need to figure out what is the best way, short-term and long-term, to meet the needs of our students as well as the needs of our community and our staff. And it's not easy. There's no easy solution to this.
Mike, is there discussion going on at the state level regarding making this, doing this across the board? Is there any serious discussion, policy discussion, or is it just popping up? How prevalent is it?
There is discussion. There's a pilot group of schools that are supposed to be going through this and moving their start times back. I don't know where that is right now, but that is happening. And former Governor Cody has been one of the primary leaders of that movement. He's very involved in mental health related issues, and he's been on the forefront of this.
He's very progressive, mental health advocate. All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments? No? We can move on with the agenda. Thank you, Dr. LaSousa. So does that go, will you be representing to either the policy or the curriculum committee on what your findings are? And are you going to pull together any kind of committee in your schools to work through some of the challenges?
I'm speaking
Impact
with
of staff?
several of the principals about that right now.
Okay, student assistance counselors, impact of students, okay.
But I think maybe we should, as a board, maybe for either for curriculum or, well, I'm not sure which the right committee is, but maybe we should discuss it in terms of what direction we'd like to see it go and what we can do, as Michelle said, on a short-term basis. There was a couple options that were
Right.
no cost, minimal impact. I think it was seize the delay.
Yeah.
So if there's, maybe we could toss it back to curriculum and
Sure.
flesh it out a little bit more there. as
Okay.
well.
I was going to suggest policy since you're the chair of policy.
Like,
I
not
tagged,
it.
I tagged Michelle.
We'll work that out, but, bring that back to,
Yep.
and oftentimes we meet at the same time, so we can, either pull them together or just do it in public. You report out to a committee.
Sure.
I think this conversation has to stay in public often,
Right.
because there can be no surprises on any front. This has to be a constant conversation, and any new developments need to be reported out.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. LaSousa. Again, happy birthday. Peter? I'm sorry, Mike, were you done?
I'm all done.
Okay, fantastic. Peter, would you mind on the construction report?
Sure, basically just gonna report on the middle school auditorium. Contractor continues to make progress. The installation of the ductwork is ongoing. The electrical work and installation of the lights has started. All of the steel has been fabricated, and as it is being delivered, being installed. They are currently installing the catwalk, and once all the ductwork is done, they can do the final painting of the ceiling, and then once the ceiling is painted, they can then install the lights and the clouds, which I believe are set to be delivered this week. And so they can do that. The flooring material has been delivered and is being stored in site. The railings and the grills are in fabrication. Unfortunately, I don't have an update from the seating contractor yet as to the tentative installation, but the contractor feels confident that he will be done by December 13th, except for the seats. So then, which, as I said 2 weeks ago, means we can punch list everything and have it all done, and then be ready to roll once the seats are installed.
Can you get it? I know I asked this before, and I apologize. I don't remember the answer. Can you get a TCO for the students to do walkthroughs?
I know we did in the township. I have to check with Russ Leffert and I'm sorry, Russ Brown, the building inspector for Madison, who is represents the borough.
Okay.
And I will do that. I didn't
That'd
do
be-
it.
I just
in
want to
last
give the
meeting.
middle school
Yeah.
performers a chance to do walkthroughs on their stage. Even if the seats aren't in, they could at least use the stage if it's
And I
appropriate.
will relay that and then let James Lawrence know that as well and have that for the next meeting.
Okay, great. Anybody-
And that's all I have unless there's any questions.
Okay. I do not have any questions. See, no. Good. Okay, very good. Moving on to committee reports. Personnel just met before this meeting. I sat in as chair in place of Ms. Ciccarelli, who's in Italy. So we did a quick update on job descriptions. This is something that the Human Resources Department does periodically. They will update job descriptions for accuracy or format. There were no significant changes there, but we do review the job descriptions periodically, or not periodically, throughout the year. So there were some updates to job descriptions. We also talked about the supervisor of student health and wellness, well-being, and we've been talking about this for every day, every meeting for months, maybe years. And I don't know that we can convey the importance of this position and how it impacts the stress that our students are facing, the suicide rates, substance abuse, their emotional needs. And, their wellness is just as important. Their wellness and their health is just as important as their academic success. So we can't just say, we're reading, writing, arithmetic, and that's it. That's not the game anymore. We have to ensure that academic success won't come unless they have wellness and success in that manner as well. And we need to figure out a way to get the pieces in place to make sure that our students have what they need to be successful, and our staff, to make sure our staff is well trained. So we talked a lot about the new supervisor position that Dr. LaSousa has been talking about for no less than 2 years. So I'm happy to see that come to fruition. So that's where we spent a lot of our time on, again, student wellness. So does anybody have any questions on personnel report? No. Curriculum, Michelle did not meet, right?
Has not met. I think our next meeting is the 18th, Karen, is that right?
Yeah, I think it's,
I think it is, but I don't, yes, okay.
okay, great. And finance and facilities, I think is the same, correct? They meet next.
Correct.
And policy and planning, Ms. Kenny?
Yes, policy and planning met before this meeting. We discussed a couple of issues about, one being policy number 2340, overnight field trips, and the number of chaperones, no changes. And then we also just looked at tuition students for employees, and there's no changes in that policy either. And then for the next meeting, we will have first readings for 6 different policies. Will these be on the website, or?
We'll go first reading for November 18th, and it'll be made available to the
the
board,
pub-
and sitting in they'll be published on the website on the Friday when the agenda and all the materials go up.
So in preparation.
In the draft form.
Yeah, so in preparation for that meeting, we reviewed those 6 policies, which will be available for that November meeting. And that's it.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Liaison reports, does anybody have any? I have a performing arts.
Yeah,
Excellent. Oh, we'll go Matt, me, Michelle, Lotta.
On the recreation side, I know I brought it up in the past, but there has been some discussion about changing the borough and the township policy in terms of field usage before noon on Sundays. I have told them that we have been through this, I don't know how many times since I've been on the Board of Education, and we've never had an appetite to change our policy, which is nothing before noon on Board of Ed fields. So unless anybody has an issue with that, unless anybody wants to take that to a policy change, I will reflect back to the borough and the township that we are going to keep our policy the same for the time being.
Matt, what's the reason for that? Why don't we allow field use before noon?
We have one exception, which is football, but they can't use the speakers before noon, and that's just basically been something because of the churches in town and the respect for the churches, the time frame of that. We're just not allowed anything before noon on Board of Ed fields except for football. Football only can do it 4 times a year.
It's quality of life more than anything.
Yeah.
We used to call it civility.
Civility.
When we were young.
Yeah.
It's gone.
I don't have an appetite, but if policy wants to tee it up. Excellent.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do a quick performing arts. Marching band season has come to a close, and the jazz band is beginning the rehearsals. They're excited to announce that the jazz band will be sharing the stage with Keene University on December 5th at Keene University. The performing arts, we have 2 groups coming here at the next 2 meetings. So on the middle school string group, led by Ms. Bass, will be here on November 18th, and the following meeting, the high school string quartet will be here, led by Mr. Keller. And then the Crucible play is coming up November 22nd and 23rd, I believe, and those tickets are on sale now. We only have 732 seats, and they will sell out, so you can get them online. You can look up the performing arts website for the link to get tickets, and grab your tickets quick so you're not crying to the ticket lady. Michelle?
Just an update for the board, if you haven't read, that the Township Planning Board did approve housing developments down in the Dixie-Dale, and also for affordable housing up by where the skate park will be. So this will inevitably have some impact on our district in terms of enrollment. I don't know, if our demographer can kind of take a look and see what the impact's been in other similar towns, but it's something I think we need to keep an eye on, be aware of, and it's happening, so.
And
The expected impact from
River Road.
the River Grill, I was going to say.
River Grill.
Yeah.
Kids coming from the River
the
Grill.
expectation based upon every other facility that they built of the same common size was about 30 kids, and I'm not quite sure what.
So there's 24 affordable housing units that are approved. I don't know what
I don't know what their ratio is.
I don't know. I'm just saying,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
happening, so.
It seems to be
We've
a lot
been
more
talking about
on
it,
the
so.
shelf to come.
And Michelle, just note that Mr. Hoffman, the township administrator who was here at our last meeting, introduced himself. He reached out to us a couple of weeks ago just asking for how many students of ours live in certain developments now, as they were trying to project how many the new developments would bring. And we have a meeting with him tomorrow afternoon, and I believe one of the developers or someone else, the consultant that the township is working with, to try to give them any data that they need so that they can formalize or finalize their projections that they think about students coming into some of these locations.
Okay.
And anyone could join that meeting with us. He told us it was an open meeting if we wanted to bring anyone else, but Peter and I will be there.
Okay, when is that?
2:00 tomorrow
Okay.
At the township.
at the Township Municipal Building.
Okay, thank you. We're also working closely with our borough liaison, Carolyn Dempsey, on, impact to the schools and ensuring that every time they talk to developers, because not only doing River Road, the bus company has also decided to sell their property as well, which is across the street, River Road, across the street from River Grill. There's another swatch of land there that is going to be developed, in addition to the ones that we already know about. So there may be, 30 kids coming from the current River Road project, which is 250 units, some of which are affordable housing and some of which are not. So we're keeping a close eye on it, and there's also plans, there's discussions at least at the Borough Council level, that if they do a pilot or payment in lieu of taxes, that there would be some money set aside for each school-age student. And I don't know how that works out, and they're going to have to look into that and how it worked out in other districts. I don't know how, 10 years from now, when you have more or less students, do we get less money? Does the money fluctuate? So there's more to work out. But we do, we are working, closely with Carolyn on how that impacts the schools. And I know, she mentions it all the time in her meetings as well. And Tracy Ness is our counterpart in the township liaison. Any additional liaison reports? Nope. Excellent. Then I make a motion to, I'm just going to move through the agenda now, make a motion to move the minutes for the October 14th public and executive session. Peter, I'm sorry, who is on here?
We just need we do separate votes on the regular minutes. Mr. Valenti needs to abstain, and on the executive, Ms. Clark and Mr. Valenti need to abstain.
Okay, can you just do the roll
Sure.
call? Okay.
The minutes from the 10:14 agenda, the regular minutes, Mr. Gilfillan. Yes. Mr. Arnott.
Yep.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Valenti.
Abstain.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Those minutes pass 6-0-1. The executive session, Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Mr. Arnott.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Abstain.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Valenti.
Abstain.
And Ms. Weber. Those pass
Yes.
5-0-2.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, sorry for the delay. We have our first opportunity for public commentary. Hearing of the citizens of the public commentary section of this agenda is an opportunity for any members of the public to be heard about issues which are or are not topics scheduled for the current meeting, to help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard. Speakers will be asked to limit their comments to a reasonable length of time. Also, just a reminder, this is your opportunity to make comments, but it will not be a back and forth. It's not a Q&A. After all the public commentary, if there's something we can answer quickly, we'll certainly try and get to it. But again, it's not a back and forth Q&A. Yeah, roughly we'll try and time it. I know there's a few people, and Emily, I'm going to ask you to speak at the end of that if you don't mind. Sorry, Dr. Press, you have the floor.
I'm Bonnie Press. I'm representing CPAG. I just wanted to give a quick update. CPAG had their first fundraiser and partnered with Chianti, who was very nice in helping us with our first fundraiser, which was a success. I wanted to thank Dr. Dalia, who participated, or actually led our lecture earlier this month as an introduction to special education, or an overview. He's also kindly agreed to come back and give a follow-up on a hypothetical IEP, which I think is scheduled for November 20th. There were 46 parents in attendance, and there was a great discussion. Our website has been up for a month. We've had 650 unique hits, even 2 from China, and I don't really understand that, but I'm happy that they're interested. The Literacy Task Force put out their first newsletter, and I'm hoping that many of the Board of Ed have already had an opportunity to see it. Our next joint meeting is December 5th. Do I have another 30 seconds? I'm taking off that hat just as Bonnie. I think this is unbelievably wonderful, this exploration to switch to a later day. Every one of those sites, I'm familiar with that data, says far and away you cannot fight nature, and the circadian rhythms just cannot be overcome. I think the seize the delay option, just on first blush, I'm concerned about whether we not only would not help, but we might harm, because now not only are we having this consistent sleep, but we are actually going to flip-flop. So 2 days you'll have this, and now not only are we less sleep, but now it's almost like the shift work phenomenon. I also would lastly add that there is data to support compromise in body mass index, self-esteem, executive functions, all of the things that are either pandemic among our students. So I agree with Michelle's comment that there is not going to be any solution that's going to make everybody happy. But first and foremost, getting our kids the sleep that they need to be successful is paramount. And Matt, I think that your comment about doing what we can at home, getting screen times down earlier, making sure we have time to wind down our brains beforehand, looking that they're not drinking caffeinated beverages. Maybe we want to get rid of the caffeinated beverages even in school, might be things that we can do to complement this very important initiative. I'm done. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Megan Operowitz, and I'm a junior at Chatham High School. I live on Shumpike across from Cougar Field, and I'm currently doing my Gold Award for Girl Scouts. I'm here tonight seeking your support and approval to turn a section of Shumpike Road into a school zone so that high school students can cross the street more safely for after-school sports practices. Every day after school, students walk from the high school and they cut down the woods off Pine Street and cross at a very dangerous intersection where cars have a hard time seeing them, because they come out very unexpectedly, and this doesn't give a lot of time for drivers to react. And then even on the rare occurrence that they use the legal crosswalk at Pine and Shumpike, cars don't really tend to stop for pedestrians. And that's why for about 3 weeks, I observed and counted 80 students crossing daily with many cars and trucks that passed students, they did not slow down, and they even honked their horns at them. The manual on uniform traffic control devices for streets and highways defines a school zone as a designated roadway segment adjacent to, approaching, or beyond a school building or school grounds, or where school-related activities occur. As you know, Shumpike Road has a speed limit of 35 miles per hour, but it is very clear that a lot of cars tend to exceed the speed limit, which causes a big problem. And a case study from 2017 showed that an average of 11,537 cars drove between Noe and Lafayette every single day, and that is a lot of cars. In addition, I found a study by the National Cooperative Highway Research Program, which said that pedestrians struck by cars traveling at 40 miles per hour only have a 15% chance of survival. That same study showed pedestrians had a 95% chance of survival when struck by a car going 20 miles per hour. The students' safety is on the line every time they cross the street. I have met with many members of the community and received a lot of support. Town Administrator Bob Hoffman came to my house to witness the issue for himself. I've met with coaches of all the teams and the assistant principal at my school. I've met with Chatham Township police officers Michael Sawyer and Scott Herchek, who supported the idea of installing signage and enforcing the speed limit. I've spoken with the Safe Routes to School committee, who have given me guidance. And I have collected over 650 signatures from students, residents, and parents. My proposal is to install flashing signage on Champagne in between Rose Street and Driftwood between 2:30 and 3:30 when students are present and during all school-related events such as games and practices. I'm here tonight seeking a letter of support signed by the members of the committee. With your support, I plan to go before the Chatham Township Committee to ask that an ordinance be established to make and enforce the area around Cougar Field a school zone. Thank you very much.
I've been on the board for 3 years, and I think that's one of the best presentations that I've heard. It was,
Thank you very much.
it was comprehensive. You did a lot of research, and I am an avid walker, and I can attest to all the things that you mentioned. You did a great job.
Thank you very much.
Mike, thank you for your kind words after I just gave a presentation. But Megan, they should give you the gold award right now. I have one question for you.
Yeah.
And the people and groups you've talked to, is there any issue because that road is a county road? Are there any problems or, is it more difficult to get this accomplished because it's a county road, or can the township still do it?
I know I'm eventually going to have to talk to county, but I plan to try to get as much support as I can. So I eventually want to talk to it because I don't want to just glide through because it is a county road. So it just makes more logical sense to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, I also had an opportunity to interview high school students before they crossed over the street. And many of them mentioned that they were nervous or scared before crossing. So that's awesome.
One point is the police and the township administrator did contact county on our behalf as well, too. So we obviously, I'm sorry.
I know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Craig Alperowitz, Megan's father and proud supporter.
Thank you.
They did contact the county. We obviously know we need their approval of some sort. We're not sure as to exactly how that, what that involves. But Southern Boulevard is also on a county road, and it's been approved as well on their side.
Thank you, Megan.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Great job.
Could you sign in? And could you send your letter that you need our signatures on to Dr. LaSousa? You need a letter, right?
Yeah, a letter of support saying that you...
Just to make it easier, do you mind just sending it to Dr. LaSousa and he'll get it to us for signatures and whatnot?
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Amy Reale. I just wanted to make a couple comments as a parent tonight and not my usual CPAG role. About the sleep, I know I have a lot of relatives who have tried, instead of the flip that you had mentioned, one of the things that I had heard was even though the middle schoolers might be getting enough sleep, to put them at the latest because they're not having the after school sports. And I think now having a sixth grader, I can see what this tsunami of middle school does, and that, having that extra hour in the morning for the study skills, organizational learning that's happening in sixth grade, I think sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, would not be a bad thing. So, and then the other thing I would add is, hopefully when we're talking about developments and increasing students, I don't know if a conversation has ever happened about getting back to a K through 5 model, and that would sort of take away one of the tiered slots or the opening times, which, and then the other thing I wanted to say about health and well-being, because we talked about this the last meeting, but I think I always look at a school when I'm looking at health and well-being, and I look at how do we handle lunch. And I think the schedule, having kids eat at 10:30 their lunch and then not having anything until they get home at 3:30 is also potentially disastrous, not just the sleep. So giving kids breaks, maybe it's not called recess, but especially middle school. Again, I think this transition from 5th to 6th grade, and I know that's something the curriculum committee was looking at too. That would be my 2 cents, is that let's really look at the schedule and when the kids get to sit down, take a break, how they break. I know there's a lot of numbers, but how they get to break. Do they get to eat together? Because that's when a lot of good conversations happen amongst teachers that don't get to see each other and have that egg carton effect. So I would add lunch as the thing to look at too. And then I also wanted to say I've been kind of becoming obsessed, because I have a 3rd grader through 9th grader, on opportunities for kids, big and little kids, to see each other. And I just wanted to go on record as saying, I don't know who coordinates this. The Halloween parade at Washington Ave is amazing. And I'm so happy that the principal pushed through and they did it and they got rained on. And it was probably the most memorable parade that those kids had because of it. But when the high school band comes and does Thriller and leads the kid, I just think it's such a positive interaction of big and little kids seeing each other, and I think it means a lot to both groups. So another opportunity I could see is we've also just finished this Bullying Awareness Month. So, I mean, I kind of am like giving all of this under the umbrella of health and well-being, but the bullying, I feel like the kids get the message from an assembly, from this, like you don't bully, bullying is bad. But I really feel like there's an opportunity to talk about empathy and to use peer mediators from the high school, could do these things at Lafayette, could talk about empathy, do role playing in a more substantial way, and that there might be, because I know in Summit, my daughter's in a peer mediator group and they can go to the Summit elementary schools and talk, and I think that message coming from middle schoolers or high schoolers presenting to K through 3 is really powerful, and so I just add that as something I've seen that has worked, and I think really adds to the bullying awareness, because I think it's really more empathy building that we're looking to do. So thank you.
Ed Barmakian, Chatham Borough. I'd like to add another option to Miss Dr. LaSousa's options. She could contact the state and try to become one of those sponsored pilot programs that start later and might facilitate, since you want to start, so soon, and maybe it will work out financially too for the town. Who knows? Just my thought.
Looking into that as well. Thank you, Ed. Any additional public commentary? Emily, would you mind doing I know you only need a few minutes, so you might as well do it now, and I know you're a first semester senior with, you're the people we talk about with our graphs and charts and stress and anxiety.
I empathized with those graphs a little bit.
I queued it up at the beginning about that you wanted to start a student representative member of the board, not a voting member, but a representative, and I have your proposal, which I've passed out in some degree, but if you wouldn't mind,
right.
Just
I have another copy here if anybody needs it as well. Okay. So yeah, I'm also working on my Gold's Word project. I'm a senior at Chatham High School this year. And so part of my project is increasing the level of connection between students and local government, because a lot of people at Chatham High School aren't actually able to vote, but they are directly affected by a lot of the decisions that are made every day in local government and on the school board. And so my solution to this issue is creating a representative that is from Chatham High School, who isn't obviously a voting member of the board, but is responsible for coming to every meeting or every other meeting, and is basically that level of connection between what's going on in the school board and what's actually happening with students in the high school. So they would be responsible for coming to each meeting, hearing what's being said, hearing what's being discussed, taking that information and sharing it back out to the student body. And on that same level, they're responsible for gathering up information about what students think about what's being discussed, and as well issues that are going on within the school that maybe aren't being discussed within the board, and then bringing that information back and sharing it with you so that you can kind of make those changes that are affecting us more systemically. And I think that one of those things is, the start time in school. And I think that it's really great that those conversations are being had. And I know that it's going to be a little bit past my time in the high school, but I do hope that as you continue having those conversations, you are bringing students in, because, we're the ones who are actually going to be affected by it every day, including teachers as well. So I think that's a really important point to bring up. And different issues that are affecting students, the later start time, infrastructure, privacy, security, curriculum, all of those things we're living every day, and it's something that we should be able to have a voice on in the school district. So unless there's any other questions or comments, if you want me to talk about the process, the selection process, or anything like that, that's all pretty much listed in the
Good. I just didn't know if we can discuss it in board business more formally, but did anybody have any questions for Emily on the position of a student rep as a whole?
Would you make it student council level, Mike?
Yeah, well, that was something we discussed when I was kind of starting to bring this up. I think that it's something that maybe should be separate from the student government at Chatham High School, just because I don't think that that's the role that the student government has within the school district. In a lot of other areas, the class president kind of has a not just that they are more impactful in curriculum efforts and things like that. In Chatham High School, that's just not the way that it's been structured. And I think that if that is something, if we do want to have the class president be responsible for that position, it's going to have to be a change that happens, from 8th grade when they're electing.
You have a student council body right now, which is a president, a vice president, a treasurer, a secretary. It's kind of a cabinet. So I would say add this position to that cabinet. So there is that quasi-liaison role between what the student government is talking about, what their issues are, and have those things delivered back to the Board of Ed, because we don't get them.
Yeah.
We get them in the aisles of ShopRite, which I don't want.
Well, I'm not personally
I'd much prefer
involved. Yeah.
to have a coordinated liaison between the two entities. So there's if it's every meeting or every other meeting, we would kind of like a committee report we get here. We'd like to hear what the kids have to say, and what the issues that they're working with and the issues that they'd like to see us address.
And Matt's not suggesting you change your selection process.
Yeah.
It's not a voting thing. The students won't vote on it. It'll still follow your process. He's just formalizing it in that other structure, council structure.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I'm never been involved in those groups. Although I don't know how much student government talks about these kinds of more systematic issues, but I'm sure that there's a way that there can be kind of a support group for the representative to kind of facilitate that discussion as well. So
right now, though, you're just asking for our support in the creation of this position.
Right. So, I mean, pending your support, hopefully there'll be someone chosen by January. So.
Okay, we'll bring this up during board business, and we could make a motion and take a vote on it then. I'm not suggesting you hang around, but if you can, that's great. If you can't, I understand. So thank you. I appreciate your presentation. Yeah, we're almost there.
All right,
We're close. Okay. Thank you, Emily. So we're going to move on to the regular agenda right now. We're going to start with personnel. Ms. Checkerly is not here, so I will move action items A1 through 18 on the regular agenda, and there is an addendum of A19 and A20. I need a second.
Second.
Excellent. Doesn't hit me.
Mike, our supervisors, are they 9-month, 10-month, 11-month, 12-month positions, or?
They're
they
10-month
vary?
positions with 15 days in the summer.
They're 12-month with 15.
10 and 15. So
these
September
are
1
10-month
through June
positions.
30.
10 and 15.
Okay.
Mhm.
10 with 15.
Right. 10-month positions, but they get 15 days off in the summer?
They have to do.
They work 15 full days in the summer in addition to September 1 to June 30.
Okay.
So if they work 3 weeks in
Okay.
the summer.
Yes, but we don't schedule those days all in a row. We
Right. It's up to
depends
them.
when we have meetings and
Okay.
professional development, so forth. So picking up on that note,
Theme.
though, on the addendum, I'm thinking back to 2006 when the superintendent summoned the two assistant principals who were working in Chatham High School at the time, one of which was me, one of which was Darren Groh. And at the time they were the superintendent and the board were searching for a high school principal, and he sat us down and said, right now we have one principal and two assistant principals. I'm thinking we could have two principals and one assistant principal for the same cost, but have two principals lead the school, given the circumstances and priorities and so forth. And of course we jumped at the opportunity, and Mr. Groh and I became co-principals with only one assistant principal. So there wasn't an additional cost burden, but we had a different administrative structure that was at the time creative and seemed to work out reasonably well. So this time around we had a similar situation in that we've had a staff vacancy since June, and that is the vacancy that was left by Kathleen O'Connor, who is now the principal at Southern Boulevard School. But the position that she had been in, we didn't fill because of the circumstances in late June. And at the end of the day, after many discussions and brainstorming sessions with board members, with administrators, I decided to alter the position she was in to that of supervisor of student health and well-being, because this is a critical topic. There's no area that's more important. And so we had an extensive search process like we always do. We had a committee that interviewed 7 finalists. Of the 7 finalists, 2 were so neck and neck that there was really no clear choice among the committee. So the 2 finalists came to me. And in my discussions with the finalists and hours of meetings with them, what I am recommending to you is that we appoint both of them as supervisors. We creatively fill the positions they'll be leaving so that we're cost neutral, roughly, and we're not incurring an increase in budgetary cost. And those 2 people that I'm recommending are Karen Leister, who is currently the nurse at Southern Boulevard School, and Lisa Lattarulo, who is a student assistant counselor at the high school, and from whom you've heard on multiple occasions before talking about student health and well-being. So I'm delighted that the 2 of them have expressed willingness to partner together and to try to move us forward in a way that benefits students and addresses many of the issues that we've been discussing at many board meetings in recent times. So that is the addendum: Lisa Lattarulo and Karen Leister as supervisors of student health and well-being.
I think these candidates are great. I wish Ann was here because she participated as chair of the personnel, but it should come as no surprise to anybody that the best candidates came from within the district. You know, we have the best of the best, and that's why a lot of our teachers get plucked from our district to be supervisors or principals. So it's absolutely no surprise that, you know, Lisa and Karen are from our own district, and that's where you found the best of the best. You know, their reputation precedes them, so we can't be in better hands. And I think this is a good first step, and this is only a first step toward, you know, increasing our wellness and our emotional program. And it'll be nice to have a team that's going to oversee the entire program and have a very deliberate curriculum and age appropriate through the years. And I'm not an educator. I lean on Michelle a lot for this, but I think it's absolutely critical, similar to how you implemented a single supervisor for the STEM program and wrote the curriculum K to 12. I find it's a similar process, you know, that will have one team responsible for delivering that message and that programming instead of it being building specific. So I think we're in great hands, and congratulations and thank you. It's a huge responsibility. I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to add to that. A thumbs up for Michelle. Thumbs up. Okay, fantastic. Does anybody else have any questions? Mike's contract is also on the agenda, which we've talked about. Any other questions on personnel? Beth loves questions. Nothing more than anything. Beth loves questions. No? Seeing none. Peter?
Sure. Excuse me. Agenda items A1 through 18 and number 19 and 20 on the addendum. Mr. Gilfillan? Yes. Mr. Arnick?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items pass 7-0.
Resounding yes. I'm going to go off trail just for a moment. Karen or Lisa, did you want to say anything? And I hate to keep you here later because I know you're in like the 16th hour of your workday. You don't have to. I just didn't. If you wanted to, I didn't want to deny you the opportunity. This way, folks can also, see who you are.
Yeah. I wanted to just express my gratitude. That's what I feel today. I feel gratitude for the time that I've had at Southern Boulevard to grow as a person and as a nurse, and gratitude for the recognition of the importance of student health and well-being. I'm the support of our superintendent, the board, the other administrators, and I'm really, really looking forward to working closely with Lisa and learning from her too.
I know for me, this is what I've sort of dedicated my career in Chatham to, is doing health and wellness for students. But I feel really grateful for the fact that I'm going to step into a role where I feel like I can help even more students at a bigger level, being able to work with young kids, the middle-aged kids, and the high school age kids. So I'm really appreciative of being able to have the opportunity to do this and, really try to make an impact and do something that maybe other districts are not doing, and really sort of set, be like a role model for other districts moving forward. So looking forward to working with Karen, and of course looking forward to working with everybody else within district to coordinate this. Okay, thank you for all your support.
Almost cost neutral. You always forget that part. Fantastic. Thank you, ladies. Really appreciate your enormous job ahead of you. Moving over to Finance and Facilities, Mr. Gilfillan. I thought we did vote.
Did we vote?
We did vote,
We did?
and that,
Okay.
yeah, that was.
I'd like to move action items B1 through 12 on your regular agenda. Just one donation from the Lafayette Avenue School PTO, and the amount of $3,000 for the Liberty Media Center to support the continued purchase of high-interest fiction and nonfiction books. That's interesting.
Excellent.
Didn't think anybody bought books anymore.
Did you get a second?
Yes.
Oh, thank
Sounds
you.
ironic.
Thanks. Any questions for Finance and Facilities? No? Excellent. Seeing none, Peter?
Sure. Agenda items B1 through B12. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Arnick?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes on B1 through B9, abstain on 10, and yes on 11 and 12.
Thank you. Duly noted. Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items B1 through 9, 11, and 12 pass 7-0. B10, 601.
Excellent. Thank you. Curriculum, Ms. Clark?
Yes, I move items C1 through C6 for vote.
Second.
Cusack. Excellent. Any questions for curriculum? Again, these agendas are posted on Friday, so if it appears that we go through them quickly, it's because we read them already. Any questions? No? Seeing none, Peter?
Sure. Agenda items C1 through C6. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Arnick?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items pass 7-0.
Policy, Alada?
Yes, I'd like to move action items D1 for vote.
Mike Ryan seconded. Any questions on this? If they're not coming from Mr. Valenti, we don't have any questions. No. All those in favor of D1?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Excellent.
Duly noted. Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Mike, can you remind me what they smell for? Is it? Can they smell for vape, or what can they smell for tobacco? What can they smell for?
It's I think marijuana, the standard, the marijuana, cocaine, illicit drugs.
Okay.
They cannot smell out alcohol, I don't believe, and I don't know about vaping devices.
Excellent.
Taylor
Okay.
County start getting those dogs wound up.
They contain THC maybe, but
Yeah. You good, Matt?
Yeah, I just forgot.
Okay. Okay, so we have our opportunity for board business now. I would like to make a motion to create or to support the creation of a a student representative on the Board of Education, which will be managed by an advisor. An advisor at the school along with a student. Somebody second it?
I second.
Oh, Michelle seconds that. Any discussion, or we ready to vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Peter, can you add that audible? Emily, you're good? Excellent. We. I know. I know it's late. I'm trying to get some sleep. I know. I need you to get some sleep. You're making us feel bad. So we have our second opportunity for public. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Laura.
No worries. I just wanted to remind the community that there is an open seat for the township for the reindeer games of the Board of Education. So if you are interested in submitting your name to join us, if you could, we're creating the deadline of November 15th, and then hopefully we will have an announcement by the next meeting, which is December 16th.
So how would someone do that?
Submit it to the Board of Education email.
It's on the website.
It's on the website, and if you have a resume or CV that you'd like to submit, that would be great. But it's we'd like to close it off by November 15th.
And you have 3 or 4 or so, right? Currently,
There's some interest.
There is interest,
There
yes,
has been
but we'd like to make
interest.
sure.
Well publicized.
Yeah, we want to make sure that
Okay.
if anyone has any interest, that they
And
make their intent
typically
known.
the process is if it's a township vacancy, the township representatives on the board select that person and make a recommendation to the full board, and the full board votes on it. If it's a borough vacancy, the borough representatives take the lead on that. So it's a full board vote, but it's really a township decision to kind of present and do the legwork.
And then I also wanted to mention that there was a few of us that went to Atlantic City for the New Jersey school boards meeting, and I want, it was there was many seminars and different meetings that they had, but the one that really struck me was a presentation on rethinking safety in schools, and it was presented by the chief academic officer from Parkland, and his discussion kind of talked about how Parkland kind of handled identifying children that had behavior issues, and then how with the scrutiny of what happened at Marjorie Douglas Stoneman. Yes, that high school, how they revamped their entire identification process. My main takeaway was that there's a lot of improvements that we as a board could probably make in terms of hard security, like getting the vestibules and the security officers, but his recommendations was to really focus on the mental health and student wellness of the students, and that getting as much information about behavioral threat assessments and getting as much of some of the steps that we're trying to take in terms of creating an environment that is healthy for these students, and so I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you, Lotta. The program that I most identified with was there's a parent from Sandy Hook who lost his 6-year-old son in the shooting. He was in the classroom. There were no survivors of that classroom. And he's the third speaker that I've heard, one teacher and 2 parents. And it amazes me how much they recall of the exact timeline as if they're reliving it every time they're on the stage. But his program is called Dylan's Wings, and it's mostly focused on starting at a much younger age, getting kids to empathize with each other, and instead of being isolated, pull them into the fold a lot sooner so they don't feel this isolation. In this particular gentleman's case, the shooter was a neighbor. He lived 2 doors down and across the street. This is a kid that he had seen, grow up in the neighborhood, and this kid was just so isolated, and the shooter took it out on his elementary school. And Dylan's Wings is a program, and Karen Chase and I spoke about it, and Karen expressed some interest in maybe trying to pull it into our district. Mental health, starting when this student, the shooter that's going to grow up to be 16, starting when they're in first grade and changing their paradigm and making them not feel as isolated, that is their only out. So Dylan's Wings was the program that resonated with me.
Comment on the same presentation. One of the things Mr. Hockley talked about was his older son asked one day, why Dylan would flap his wings. Dylan had autism, and that really struck me a little bit because he was talking about my family, right? So after a couple of tears, I paid attention to what he was saying, and the Dylan's Wings, the Wingman program, is, as you said, about he kind of took the tragedy of his son's murder and turned it into something positive, in that outside of the politics, regardless of what you feel about gun control or whatever, it wasn't about politics for him. He said that at some point in the perpetrator's life, he was isolated, alone, exposed to video games, and too much influence from different things that he probably shouldn't have been influenced by. So the Wingman program is about taking kids in different situations, putting them together to solve common, not so common problems. But for example, they work on putting toothpaste back in a tube after you squeeze it out. You can't, but you sit there and you work on those things for hours, and there's different programs and training that our SACs would probably benefit from, to bring these kids who we know are isolated. We know who the kids are here, and we can do a lot of good with a program like that here.
Sure, go ahead.
First of all, you make me tear up, brother. So thanks for your comments, and thank you for such a fantastic board to work with, who are always together on the most important issues. And the one thing I'd just like to add is we help oversee. It's you guys who do the work. It's the teachers, it's the supervisors who do the work. We're to oversee, to make sure things are done prudently. I can't stand hearing the word cost attached to this issue. Cost is, what does it cost to turf the field? What does it cost to maintain the bathroom for these functions? This is an absolute investment in life. And if we're not seeing it in mass shootings and the problems that our students are experiencing, woe is the school district that does not make these investments and then later has to explain or later has to know that for cost, they could have changed the outcome for some people. Anyway, thank you.
So there's a lot of good programs. I encourage, if you're, it's a big time commitment, so I know everybody can't get there, but whoever can, will try and bring back what we took away from the day or days in the training. So any additional board business? No, very good. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. Thank you, Michael, Ryan, for sharing. For next opportunity for public commentary. Mr. Heap's coming around. While Mr. Heap is coming around, Mike, I don't know. Mike, are we having an executive session?
We do have an executive session. Action will not be taken.
Action will not be taken. Okay.
Chatham Borough. I know it's late. I will be quick. First thing I wanted to do was, just dropped a pen. First thing I wanted to do was to whip out my iPhone and take a picture of Ed Barmankian up at the podium so I could put it in his own paper. Unfortunately, I don't have an iPhone. Okay. Second thing, a week ago Friday, the Chatham Historical Society had their annual Hops and History and Hops extravaganza. And the taps were wide open, and we were entertained by Mr. Arnott and his band of merry minstrels. It was a bargain entertainment, just great entertainment at a bargain price. I would urge anybody who wants to see them to go out to their local venue. And there's a rumor going around that you've been booked in the Garden for a couple of days in the spring. Is that true?
We're going downstream to Royal Albert Hall.
Okay. It was a great community event. And the last thing I would like to do is to agree with Mr. Gilfillan on some of these wellness issues. Without parental involvement, I think you're going to be spinning your wheels. We have a high level of education in this town. Something approaching 80% of the people have a college degree. It seems to me that some of this stuff falls under the category of basic blocking and tackling when it comes to the amount of sleep your children have. And if they're not involved, I don't know what to say. It makes me shake my head sometimes. I know that when you see a problem, there's an urge to act, but without that involvement, it could be a waste of time. That's all I'll say. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Any additional public commentary? Oh, seeing none. I want to thank our student audio video team. Thank you again. I know, sorry it was a late meeting. We promise the next one will be faster. Right here. So we're going to close to executive session. No action will be taken. So thank you, everybody. Thank you. Drive safely.